in the House State Affairs Committee, Representative Dale Hawkins formally presented House Joint Resolution number 1, which would change the language in our Constitution when it comes to education. So let's listen a little bit to Representative Hawkins' presentation.
What we are doing is we are catching up with our statute. We are catching up with what the Supreme Court has already done. I think all of you have some literature that's been passed out to you. I mean, and I think you even have this, which I'll read from HJR 1 strikes concurrent language from Article 9, Section 9, that the legislature may require that every child shall attend the public school of the state, and replaces it with the principle that parents have the fundamental right to direct the education of their children outside of public education. We get that from this language that we're inserting here, the right of the people to educate their children without government regulation outside of the public school of the state shall not be infringed. We are just recognizing the natural right. We're not granting anything to parents they don't already have. We're not granting anything to parents that we haven't put in code. In Chapter 10, or Title 32, Chapter 10, Chapter 1011, Chapter 1013. I don't think we got these passed out to you. I could read through these. We already do this. In 1014 too, it says, the interest and role of parents in the care, custody, control of their children are both implicit in the concept of ordered liberty and deeply rooted in our nation's history and tradition. They are also among the inalienable rights retained by the people under the 9th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. You have 2 cases in front of you right now that show that our Supreme Court has already ruled for a state to compel attendance has been ruled unconstitutional. It violates religious liberty. We are not dealing with children who are already enrolled in public education. This does not affect them. It doesn't even say that you have a right not to educate your children. That's not assumed here either. This is that you cannot compel somebody who is doing otherwise educating to come to the public school system.
All right, Alman. So that's what's going on here. We've kind of shared some of this language before, the before and after of what it looks like. But when it comes to, and we'll go through some other clips here to challenge, so we don't have to like fully give away the spoilers or whatever. But I guess at a high level here, let's just talk about the fact that we're changing the Constitution, and what that means, how we go about doing it, and then we'll get into the specifics on this particular resolution.
Go ahead. Yeah, Idaho Constitution is the supreme law of the land. I mean, obviously, as states, we are superseded by the federal government in some areas. But the Idaho Constitution is superior to all statutes and rules and everything else that's passed in the state, even at the local level. You know, nothing can violate the Constitution. So changing it is difficult, but not impossible. Just like the founders of our country, the founders of our state saw that it might be necessary to amend the Constitution. And our state Constitution has actually been amended a lot more than the federal Constitution. Every couple of years, you'll see something on the ballot, because to amend it, you have to get it through both chambers of the legislature, House and Senate, with a 2/3 majority. So it's a much higher threshold than the usual just regular majority, 50% plus one, that you need for laws. And then it goes on the ballot, and the people of Idaho have to approve it. Just last year, 2024, there was a constitutional question. It clarified the language around voting, saying that non-citizens can never vote in Idaho, not at any level, not city elections, state elections, whatever. So that was on the ballot. We voted. We approved it by something like 65 or 70%. So that's now part of the Constitution. So this, if Joint Resolution 1 were to pass, it would it first has to pass the House with a 2/3 majority. Then it has to pass the Senate with a 2/3 majority. Then it goes on our ballot, and it's a question that we, the people, then get to approve. And that's just a simple majority.
Yeah, right. Well done laying it out there. And just to reiterate, like you just said, we just did this in November, in the November election. So this is not an uncommon thing for us to do with our Constitution. Our Constitution is much larger than the federal Constitution, as it should be, because the federal Constitution wants to leave the outside of the Constitution regulating how the federal government operates and what it looks like. and the Bill of Rights and the rest of the amendments that came out under that. Everything else should be left up to the states to decide. And so this is where we get to do this sort of thing. Okay, well, let's get into the meat of this, because once again, this was all about enshrining in the Constitution. Basically, in layman's terms, they're not going to argue it this way, but it's basically going to enshrine in the Constitution that parents have the ultimate authority on how they educate their children. And so we're specifically looking at the homeschooling community, because right now the homeschooling community has the rules are such that everything is hunky dory right now for the homeschoolers. But there's nothing in our statute that says, or in our Constitution that says the legislature can come in and just like pass wide sweeping regulations on homeschooling.
Right. And that's been a battle that the homeschoolers have been fighting for a long time to get to that point. You go back to when our Constitution was originally written, 1889, 1890, the time of statehood. That's right at the start of the progressive era, this idea that we can use government to, create a better life for everybody. And you can kind of see where they were coming from at the time, because education was something that not everybody got. Most people would just learn from their parents and learn whatever they knew. And if their parents weren't very literate, then the children wouldn't be literate either. They'd learn their specific trade, and that would be it. And so these progressives had this idea of a uniform public education system. We bring all the children of the state into these public schools where we teach them reading and writing and history and civics and everything else they need to be good citizens of a republic, to maintain this Republican system of government that we were given, that we've inherited. And so you see, it's, has good intentions, but things have changed and things have developed.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions on it.
And so originally they had compulsory education laws saying you have to go to school.
Right.
And they started carving out little things. Well, okay, you can go to private schools if you really want to. Oh, but they still didn't trust parents to educate children. Imagine that. By the 1960s, they put in a law that said, okay, parents can educate children, but it has to be under the purview of the school board that you live in, the district you live in, because we got to make sure they're actually learning proper things. And that's why, that's where the Shippey family, three brothers in the Shippey family, went to jail in 1982 because they refused to allow the local school district to decide what they were going to teach their children. 10 years later, Idaho passed a law saying, okay, we're going to be hands off now. And that's been the case ever since. The code does not define homeschooling. It just assumes that if parents don't want to enroll their children in public schools, then they're responsible for their education. Right. And that's great. But this HJR would obviously take it to a new level by enshrining that higher philosophical concept that parents are ultimately responsible for their children into the Constitution, so that we can't have a law later that goes and tries to alter that.
Yeah. And like so many busybodies out there, their immediate reaction to something like this is to err on the side of the bad and the negative. So rather than give everybody the benefit of the doubt and look optimistically at the opportunities available, certain folks like Representative Todd Achilles, Democrat out of Boise, says, well, this just means that all parents are just going to neglect their children and not school them. And what good is that? I mean, this where they always err on the side of good God-fearing people of Idaho being degenerates and wasting their kids' lives, is I don't know why that always comes to the first, comes to their mind first. But that was the question that was asked by Todd Achilles today and to Representative Hawkins. So let's watch a little bit of that.
Why are we opening the door for parents to not educate their kids, which is how I interpret the downside of this bill?
Representative Hawkins.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Achilles, again, I'll just refer to the old language. The legislature may require by law that every child shall attend. That's what we're dealing with here, is attend. We are not giving parents the right to not educate. If you don't educate your children, I guess that would be form of child abuse. We have plenty of other stuff in our code that recognizes that. We are dealing with the issue of the state being able to put a child in the state-run school. That is all this is doing.
Yeah, I mean, there it is. I mean, this doesn't give you parents carte blanche to just like neglect their child, so forth, right?
Yeah, no, and it's at a very deeper level. You have people like Representative Hawkins and former Senator Scott Herndon, who testified on this bill, who are pointing out that it's ultimately parents' responsibility. And the parents may delegate that responsibility to the state and send their children to public schools, but ultimately the responsibility is theirs. It's the same perspective that's taken in our Constitution when it says that all sovereignty in our state is inherent in the people, and that we then delegate that responsibility to House of Representatives, Senate, and so forth. Whereas Representative Achilles, he's coming at it from the other direction. He's saying, well, it's the state's responsibility to educate children, and so we've got to make sure that bad parents don't neglect their children. That's our responsibility.
Well, that's and maybe there's something to be said there when you compare it to us electing our own leaders. You know, I mean, are we bad voters when we're electing? Sleepy voters elect bad representatives, right? That's why we have this show, folks. That's why Almond does what he does. We got to wake everybody up. We got to keep you engaged, keep you involved. So that's really good. A good point you make out there. Okay, the chairman of the committee, everyone's favorite committee here, Representative Brent Crane, had a question as well for Representative Hawkins.
I've got a question for you. We've had some issues, one being school choice this year, and the homeschool community, there's discussion in there whether they're split on that issue or supported. Have you met with the homeschool community to find out if they're in support of this joint resolution?
I have had a brief conversation on Pi Day, which was yesterday afternoon, and I think the assurance I walked away with was they are not against this, to change the Constitution. They've been working so hard to fight our school choice bill and arrange for Pi Day. They didn't have enough time to look at it. I believe that this movement, and remember, good body, if we get this all the way across the rotunda, it's still the people of Idaho who make the decision. This constitutional amendment isn't decided here among 16 or 15 individuals or myself or even the 70 or the 35 in the Senate. If we go all the way here, the people of Idaho will decide. But I do think that a lot of the fears that engage the homeschool population is rooted in what we're dealing with right here. It's a looming fear that they may make you go to their, that we may make them go to the school that the state runs. Okay.
Yeah, well put there. We sent in, our organization sent in written testimony in favor of this bill this morning, and we really wanted to highlight how Idaho has made has made national headlines when it comes to homeschooling over the years, as you alluded to earlier, with putting members of the Shippey family in jail in the 80s for homeschooling their kids. And now, before this resolution, still having one of the more freest places in the country to do homeschooling, where the state doesn't even have an accurate count of how many families are homeschooling, because there's absolutely no record. You don't need to register. You don't need to do anything to just homeschool. So we're at a point now where we want to enshrine this in the Constitution. And make sure that we never go down those roads again. Representative Alfieri had a great question for, as you mentioned, former Senator Scott Herndon was there to testify on behalf of this bill. He had Alfieri had a great question as to what are we trying to fix with this particular legislation. So let's watch this.
Representative Alfieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Herndon, is there one particular problem that you can point to that we're seeking to solve in this?
I would say, Mr. Chairman and Representative Alfieri, we want to take the strength that we have now, and we have excellent statutes on this subject. 10 years ago, the legislature passed overwhelmingly House Bill 113 as amended here in the House. And House Bill 113 put some very strong provisions about the right of parents to choose education for their children. We've gained that over a long fight that many of the representatives in this room have been part of, to put very solid homeschool laws and private school laws and protections into the Constitution. And we want to preserve that for future generations of Idahoans. So what we're protecting against, the problem we would be solving is, what if one day this Idaho legislature was slightly different? Do we want a future legislature to be able to just by statute easily encroach upon those protections, or do we want to take what we've won over decades of effort and have it be as easy as a statutory change? And I know statutory changes aren't easy, but that'll give you the idea. But I'll give you one more. The concept that the government, as the dispenser of education in Article 9, will create intelligent people through the public schools of the state. All throughout Idaho's history, we've also seen that private school, homeschool, and other options create intelligent people. And this levels the playing field between that fact that private schools do produce intelligent people as well as the public schools. And it basically creates a level exaltation in the Idaho Constitution for both.
Follow up? Any further questions for Mr. Herndon?
Very good. Okay, let's dip out of that. Alman, I think, such great arguments made for this resolution. And I think once it gets to the people and gets on the ballot, I think that's when you're going to start to see maybe some of the rhetoric get heightened. But folks, let me just let you know, let's throw up the graphic here. We are fully behind this. We are fully behind HJR 1. We think this is homeschool freedom for all. We believe that HJR 1 will permanently enshrine homeschool freedom, in our Constitution. And that is exactly why we should support this. And we expect to see many of our great homeschoolers get behind this resolution.